What's the big question here for mining? Because think about it, what's the biggest question here for mining? Can we use a 2 gigabyte GPU, give it another 2 to 4 gigabytes, and mine Ethereum Classic, for example? Can you use a lower end 6 gigabyte NVIDIA GPU, load that extra 2 gigabytes in, and all of a sudden start mining Conflux? This is super awesome. About hardware, so this one's really cool. If you guys are into AI or really just into compute at all or utilizing more video memory, Intel, the Core Ultra systems gain GPU memory by a sharing override feature. So Intel wants to stay competitive in delivering the latest AI features, and local LLM hosting has become a hot topic recently. The latest APUs from Intel and AMD are not only equipped with CPU and GPU cores, but also NPUs. These NPUs can run basic models on their own, but the best performance still achieved through the graphics subsystem. AMD introduced a new feature called variable graphics memory, which allows users to increase the amount of system memory shared with the graphics processor. Users can adjust the size of this memory pool within the limits set by, AMD. And the VGM feature was primarily demonstrated as a gaming enhancement, especially when paired with AFMF, enabling higher performance in games. Gamers effectively, this is going to be from the gaming perspective, where this is going to help with is higher resolution textures. So you probably, like if you're playing on a 1080p screen, increasing the graphics memory, probably not going to be that big of a deal. But if you're playing on 4K, increasing the graphics memory is going to have a massive impact on performance. So just from the gaming perspective, that's probably what you're looking at, right? Gamers effectively gain more memory to store assets, and since the size and speed of system memory are often the main factors in integrated graphics performance, this can lead to measurable improvements. However, such features do not always yield performance gains. Games designed to use whatever memory is available may load larger textures, which can actually make some titles run slower, an effect demonstrated by The Verge. For users who are not into gaming but need more memory for other tasks, such as hosting LLMs, this feature allows them to host larger models and potentially offload them entirely to VRAM when enabled. Now, obviously, what's the big question here for mining? Because think about it, what's the biggest question here for mining? Can we use a 2 gigabyte GPU, give it another 2 to 4 gigabytes, and mine Ethereum Classic, for example? Can you use a lower end 6 gigabyte NVIDIA GPU, load that extra 2 gigabytes in, and all of a sudden start mining Conflux? This is super awesome. It's something I want to test. So it's something I'm trying to get back into making content again. Health is still kind of hitting me up, but this is like one of the things I definitely am excited to test. I want to see how this works. And just for fun, from a nerd perspective, can you load that larger DAG into this additional shared memory? So Bob Duffy confirmed that Intel now offers a similar capability called shared GPU memory override. Available on Core Ultra based systems, this technology is intended for integrated graphics solutions that lack dedicated memory rather than discrete GPUs. And this is where I think AMD's solution differs from Intel, because AMD, I believe, you can use along with your discrete. And so I'm definitely going to check it out. Right now, it's called variable graphics memory. I think the Intel one, but this is there's got to be a hack around this, even the Intel side, to provide that for things like loading additional DAGs. I think it'll be sick. But anyways, these are the new technologies. I think eventually, if we're being completely honest, like 100% honest, discrete GPUs for gaming are going to go away 100%. It's just not going to be around. I think that from the perspective of AI and stuff, that's where all the discrete GPUs will go. I think they are trying to push everyone towards APUs, all of that. A lot of the new technologies like any of your FSR, DLSS, XSS, XESS from Intel, all those things are really removing the need for discrete GPUs in gaming. And it's a little depressing. I think you'll still have the enthusiasts, but at the end of the day, I think they really are trying to push people away from that. And so a lot of these technologies are aiming towards that. How well will it work with LLMs? That's another question I'll let somebody else answer, but I'd like to look into it for particularly loading larger DAGs into low-end GPUs, because I think that's the most interesting part, right? Now, AMD's really kind of turning into the new Intel, you know? I don't know if you guys remember back in the day, but I think it was like the Intel Core Duos. And they had a couple really, really good ones. And they came out with the next line. And so everybody stuck on the Core Duo because for gaming and all that, it just did perform better. And then they kind of discontinue it and that sort of thing. AMD did some really weird strategic things as of late. So they had their AM4. They were supposed to support it for X amount of years. And then they released AM5, but because it was coming out a little bit before the backwards compatibility and didn't have backwards compatibility with AM4, which they promised support for, they did go ahead and move forward with some upgrades on the AM4 side of things. We got some really good processors on the AM4 platform for both mining and for gaming. But for the gaming perspective, the thing that kind of took the world by storm was their X3D cache. And those X3D models, they released the Ryzen 7 5800 X3D back in 2022, and it quickly became the most popular CPU for gaming, I think, in the history of CPUs ever. And then they followed those releases up with the 5600 X3D and the 5700 X3D. And unfortunately, all of these product lines have eaten into their profitability on the AM5 platform. And as such, because the 5800 X3D was so popular, they began to kind of discontinue it and stop selling it in retail. So you still had the 5700 X3D available, and that really turned into the next most popular CPU to use in gaming, because you get cheap motherboards. You have a variety of different motherboards that can be utilized on. It's a great upgrade if you're already on AM4. It gives you an amazing amount of gaming performance. And from the perspective of like the average dude, typically you're building a computer for gaming. So obviously, if you look up the best CPU for gaming, it's in the top, and it's the cheapest in the top. Now, AMD is going to be getting rid of it, and they said that it's reached its end of life. And it's disappeared from retail. So if you guys haven't looked, the 5800 X3D is extremely expensive now. It's almost better advised to just, buy an AM5 motherboard and a 7800 X3D. But according to Dutch media, AMD has reportedly stopped offering its 8-core Ryzen 7 5700 X3D processor for gamers. This AM4 SKU was one of the 2 variants available with 8 Zen 3 cores and was part of the success of the 3D V-Cache program. The 8-core 5800 X3D released in 2022 and was an instant smash hit and became the best gaming CPU for the last gen platform. AMD eventually learned that the single SKU did not make sense given the demand, so they created the 5600 and the 5700, which was essentially a lower clocked variant. It is now possible to say that AMD has halted the production of AM4 based CPUs with 3D V-Cache. The 5600 X3D is exclusive to certain retailers, which I've never seen one in real life, by the way. And the 5700 X3D, which I've built a lot of systems with, by the way, is reportedly reaching end of life. And I'm going to be super disappointed because it's kind of been my go-to. Like if I have like a dad that's like, hey, what's going to be the best parts for it's like 5700 X3D, just grab it, a couple $100. It's going to be great for a long time. The 5700 X3D and 5800 were best sellers for AMD for a long time. And the 5800 X3D still serves as the best AM4 CPU, outperforming many modern mid-range CPUs for gaming. AMD never offered more than 8 cores for AM4 though. AMD now has effectively ended the AM4 X3D series, as stocks of the 5800 X3D and 5600 X3D are no longer found through normal retail chains. AMD has never communicated any plans to launch more X3D CPUs for the AM4 socket, and the time is to transfer into AM5. And the problem is, because I've had this discussion with a lot of people, and the Phenom with the 3 cores, you could unlock that 4th one. Was that before the Phenom? Yeah, it was before the Phenom. What was that one called again? It's been forever. Anyways, back to this. I really honestly think they're doing this because it's eating into the sales of the 7000 series, because if I play on a 7800 X3D and I play on a 5800 X3D, I'm going to be completely honest, I can't tell you which one I'm playing on. Like, even with DDR4, the 5800 X3D really just smashes all other competition. And it was so much cheaper, so they had to get rid of it. And it's starting to feel a lot like Intel, where the CPU upgrades aren't really that much of an upgrade, and the only reason you have to buy them is because you don't have the access anymore at retail for the older CPUs, right? From a mining perspective, I think you don't need the 3D V cache. We did do all the testing there. It doesn't really matter for mining. And because of that, and because of the amount of other, CPUs in the 5000 and AM4 in general that are good at mining, from a budget perspective, one of those used is going to be pretty easy to pick up. And then Matt says that Epic ROMs are still the best. The problem is the motherboard cost for mining. But yeah, so that's kind of where we're at as far as what they're doing. It's starting to feel very Intel-ish. And the fact is unfortunately the reason it's like that is because Intel's not competitive. Intel hasn't had a good processor since the 12900K, and arguably probably the 11900K. The 12900K was really just a little bit of an uptick. And then 13 on have so many issues from a voltage regulative perspective that it's not great. They're slower. They tried to make up with it with those special cores. They had the performance cores and then the economy cores, and those economy cores are kind of trash. It was interesting, but they're just falling behind, and I think that AMD is going to be able to behave like the leader, unfortunately, and I think this is just kind of showing that that's the direction they're headed in. We'll have to see what they do with AM6. We got AM3 and AM4 backwards compatibility. The reason AM5 was not is because the pins were swapped from the, let me see if I say this right, from the processor to the motherboard. And because of that, they're not backwards compatible. Now that they've swapped to the more modern sockets where the pins are in the sockets instead of the CPU, like Intel, which probably reduced their manufacturing costs, to be honest, is probably why they did it. Will AM6 be backwards compatible with AM5? And when we get to that point and they let us know if or not it is backwards compatible, is when we'll know if AMD has gone the way of Intel at their peak. What Intel started doing when they started going down is they started having backwards compatibility with previous chipsets on newer generation processors. And so we need equal competitiveness. Obviously, we need both companies to be competitive for us as consumers to win. And right now, I think what we're witnessing is just the passing of the torch of the king of CPUs to AMD. And once again, consumers will get screwed. And that just seems to be the way it's going. Matt does mention the DRAM situation on newer AMD processors is terrible. Yes, well, they've always had issues with memory in general, if that's what you're referencing. And I think they tried to, so one part of the reason they had that problem was because XMP was exclusive to Intel, and obviously every processor is going to communicate different. Now they did resolve that by getting us the, why am I going to Expo, right? EXPO. But yeah, I would never run AMD in quad channel. Like desktop lines on the server side, maybe that's a different deal because you're not really dealing with Expo. You're getting error correcting memory, that sort of stuff. But I would never run a desktop grade AMD CPU in quad channel. I have, and that's the reason I'll never do it. Quad channel does not work. You cannot get the timings in. They never match. It is the shittiest experience in the fucking world. And it did make me go back to my 12900K for another couple of years, right? Right now I'm on the 7950X, but I still have issues with my primary rig on the chipset side of things, chipset drivers. It drops PCI devices quite frequently, like capture cards, which obviously I use a crap ton of capture cards. I have 8 capture card ports on this main rig, and it's a crapshoot as to which card's working at the time, right? And it's so frustrating. Reboots change it. The boot times on AMD are awful. I have no idea why they're so bad. I think it's the memory training. So it goes back to that memory issue. They have a lot of issues still. And all Intel has to do is release something even remotely competitive and keep, that reliability for their chipset and the advantage they got from XMP. And they're back in the game. It doesn't take Intel. It's not like it was when Intel was in the lead, where like AMD had to do a lot to get back into the game. They had to fix their drivers. They had to come out with a competitive CPU. They had to fix their memory compatibility. Like AMD had a long way to go. Intel doesn't have that far to go, right? Their driver team's on point. Like I said, the advantage from XMP is good. Intel is in a position where they really just need to come out with a non-failing, generally competitive CPU, and they're back in the game. And cache, yeah. If they add more cache, probably. You're correct, yes. I still have, so this rig is a 9800 X3D. That rig, this white one here, which is the girlfriend's, I put my 12900K in there. I got to be honest, her 12900K is just works a little bit more reliably, meaning like part of the reason she has it is because I know if I put like an AMD processor in there, I'd be effing with crap all the time because I F with crap on this thing, I swear, all the time. There's like some weird thing and I need to go adjust a memory timing, or it just dies and doesn't come back from sleep. It's gotten a lot better with the latest BIOS patch. There was also, this had the ASRock motherboard in it. It was burning up the 9800 X3Ds. So part of that's the third-party vendors. I hope you enjoyed this clip from the Crypto Mining Show. If you would like to see more from this particular episode, take a look up here. Don't forget to also subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support me directly, you can go to sonofatech.locals.com and become a member. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next Tuesday.